Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place.
Like most teenagers, I was in front of the TV on the evening of April 4th, 1968. As I recall, I was in the den of our home in Lansing, Michigan, watching the Daniel Boone Show, when right around 8:30 there was an interruption for a special report from NBC News.
NBC interrupts its regular program schedule to bring you the following special report.
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee, shot in the face as he stood alone on the balcony of his hotel room. He died in a hospital an hour later.
About 90 minutes earlier, Dr. King had been alive and well and standing on the balcony outside of room 306 at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. Among those standing with him were his aides Jesse Jackson, Billy Kiles, and Dr. Ben Hooks.
And he looked at him and saw Ben. The reason Ben was, he had heard Ben at the breadbasket meeting play the song Precious Lord on the saxophone about 3 weeks before. We used to play my favorite song tonight. And Ben said, I will, Doc. And as he raised me, I said, Doc. That's when it hit. And no one could see the impact of it, really. I could see it, Reverend Kyles could see it, because Reverend Kyles was like about far as where you are from him. And it hit him and knocked him against the door.
Blood was everywhere. It was just a bloody scene. I ran in the room to pick up the phone to call an ambulance. I was beating on the wall saying, answer the phone. You had to use the operator to get a phone out. I was hollering, answer the phone, answer the phone. But she never answered because she left the switchboard when she heard the shot, came out into the courtyard, and she looked up and saw what had happened. She had a heart attack on the spot. She died a few days later. She was the motel owner's wife.
Waiting below to take Dr. King to a rally for Memphis' striking black sanitation workers was J. Delano Ellis, pastor of a small local church, who was moonlighting as a driver for the Friendly Taxi Cab Company.
And I heard this loud backfire noise, and when I turned my head to look back, Dr. King was on the floor, the balcony, outside his room, and his foot coming through the rail. I felt fear, I felt terror, I felt a lot of anger, and everybody was running up the steps. Blood was on the side of the door.
Dr. King was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. Central Time at St. Joseph's Hospital. He never regained consciousness after being struck in the neck with one bullet fired by James Earl Ray from a rooming house across the street from the Lorraine Motel. It was the proverbial shot heard round the world.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Police have issued an all-points bulletin for a well-dressed young white man seen running from the scene. Officers...
Presidential candidate Senator Robert F. Kennedy was in Indianapolis when he broke the news at a campaign rally.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. Considering the evidence evidently is that there were white people who were responsible, you can be filled with bitterness and with hatred, or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that is spread across our land with an effort to understand compassion and love. For those...
In a sad irony, many black folks reacted with an outburst of violence over the murder of Dr. King, who was known as the architect of the nation's nonviolent civil rights movement.
In black communities across the country, the reaction to King's assassination was a violent eruption of rage and despair. Rioting broke out in more than 100 cities. 20,000 Army regulars and 34,000 National Guardsmen were mobilized. In Chicago, Mayor Richard Daley ordered police to shoot to kill. Nationwide, 46 people died.
17 years after the King assassination in 1985, I was working as a TV news reporter and anchor in Memphis. I became friends with local attorney D. Army Bailey, who led an effort to transform the then decaying Lorraine Motel into a shrine to Dr. King and the civil rights movement. In fact, I had the honor of breaking the news that Bailey was intent on making the motel the centerpiece of a national civil rights museum.
I really wasn't out to see a Martin Luther King museum. We were simply going to use this extraordinary historic site and teach about the civil rights movement.
On September 28, 1991, DeArmy's dream was finally realized with the opening to the public of the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel, a complex of museums and historic buildings with exhibits tracing the history of America's civil rights movement from the 17th century to the present.